Okay.
All right, you
Okay.
should see it here in a second. It's kind of funny because now Facebook is the one that's lagging. Everything
Hmm.
else beats. There we go. All right, we're up. Let me refresh this. Why is that black? Oh, there we go.
Todd and Rob in the afternoon.
Afternoon delight.
With Todd and Rob. Oh, yeah.
Hey Rob, here we are. We're back with the new media show. I had to think there for a second which one which one we're doing.
Right.
But hey, how are you?
I'm doing okay, Todd. It's great to be back on the show again and just, trying to move into fall here a little bit in what I'm thinking about and what's coming in the next few months. So I'm starting to think more about Podfest and as far as on the conference side. So
Yeah.
that's that's always a that's always an interesting event to start thinking about in the context of the fall. But I also know that, or in the winter actually at that point. But there's other events that are coming up too, like CES and other, the NEB show, which is coming up soon. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of involvement of podcasting at the NEB in New York this year. But it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, so I am opting not to go to CES this year for the first time in
Wow. Okay.
19 years. Be honest with you, I need my head down on the grindstone here. I just don't have the extra time with the Christmas and then coming off and then an
Right.
extra week. And I'm first time I'm going to miss it. So I'm going to let the tech podcast team go on without me. Matter of fact, I was corresponding with the CES rep today. Scott and I were, and basically said, I'll see you next, follow on year. But I really need to head down here. One thing that's going on is I think my gate is pumping a little bit. I hear a little bit of pumping action on my compressor. So that's new, not good. I'll be able to deal with it, but you probably can't hear it, but I can hear it in my ear.
I
Just,
think I can hear a little bit of, it's almost like a little bit of a static sound that follows.
yeah. And maybe if I back off
Right.
this thing an inch, yeah, that's weird. I didn't touch anything, so but it's yeah, I can hear a little static. Maybe I'll try to adjust it. But there is a crap. Let me hit this record. Yeah, the other one's recording. Too many buttons to hit right now. I've got my old Mac Pro um, trash can that I've had for oh man, 11 years.
Yeah.
The heat sensor went out in it, and all it wants to do is the fan runs 100% all the time.
Hmm.
And sadly, the that machine was literally 5 feet away from me before it was 40 feet down the hallway,
Wow.
and it was never an issue. So it just got to the point where it was annoying the living crap out of me, and there was some software that wouldn't run. I couldn't update because basically it was end of life. You still got some Apple updates, but I was having problems with Premiere and other software. Was basically say, hey, this chipset is no longer supported. Blah blah blah. So I guess I got my 11 years of money out of that thing. So I bought a Apple Studio baseline model. And now
Hmm.
here is where you're going to giggle. When we encode this show, when I encode this show, it used to take like 23 minutes or something like that. How long do you think it took to encode this show with that new studio?
You're encoding the video or the
Yeah, once I
audio?
encode the video from the master down to um, basically the show output,
Probably less than 10 minutes, probably.
3.3 minutes and 15
Wow.
seconds, down from like 20 plus. So Yeah, from it. So now, I don't have upload speed, but I surely have, what do you want to call it, processing speed.
Yeah. Well,
So that's good. And also, I made a change here where I'm no longer on a boom mic. I'm on a boom mic, but it's different. It comes in underneath. So
oh,
it
it
comes
does.
in and comes up. So before it was come over and come down. And the reason for that I'd have problems with camera views. So if you can see the camera view, it's
Oh,
better.
right. Okay, I see what you're
Yeah,
doing.
better now to come in that way.
So I
Uh,
do see some people flipping that and actually having the boom arm be kind of like below, not above.
yeah, mine would not do that. So basically, it
Oh, it
comes up,
wouldn't. Okay.
comes off the table, has a
Right.
straight bar that's about 18 inches or so, and
Mm-hmm.
then another extension that comes up. It's really slick, and to be honest with you, it's less intrusive and gets out of the way. That pumping went away. That's weird. Okay. Well, I don't think it's there anymore. So anyway, whatever was going on solved itself, but I still probably will need to tweak that. But yeah, I think the studio now is 99% in, and I have to remember I got myself a note now. There's an up and a down on the screen because last show you were way up there and I was looking way up at you
Right.
instead of straight at you.
Right.
So it looked like I was looking off into space.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
now,
that's a common thing. People have to mount their camera somewhere, and it depends
yeah,
on how large their monitor is, if it's sitting on top of it or sitting
yeah.
next to it. But I did hear, or I have seen, actually, is a better way of saying it, new cameras that are being kind of promoted online that, it's almost like they have this arm that hangs right down in front of your monitor. So when you
Oh,
are looking directly at the monitor, you're actually looking at the camera, but it's still a webcam. It
yeah,
just
yeah.
mounts on the top of your monitor. So it has the actual camera lens down in the middle of the screen
Oh, that's
versus,
smart.
yeah.
Oh, send me a link to that. So what I do now is behind me. So for those of you that are doing video, you don't care. But for the tech show, what I do is I raise the monitor up. It goes up about literally 16 inches.
Yeah.
And then I can look straight to go over my content that I'm talking about without having to look down at the monitor that's here. That's my problem is the monitor here as I'm
Right.
looking
It's
right
down.
now is
Right.
down and the lens is right there. Now everything behind me when I'm doing the show is right at the edge. So it actually looks like I'm looking just a little bit above the camera. And so what I'm going to actually try for the next show, I'm going to get everything set up and then I'm going to turn this monitor off because I keep going back and forth a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at some point I'll get myself trained where if by switching screens, I can do a transition that will, anyway, it's just little stupid things like this. But that
Yeah,
I
it
did,
is, and that's one advantage of having a teleprompter.
yeah.
Is
Well, I
that you can
guess,
actually mount the camera right behind your image. It's the same idea as what I was just talking about
yeah.
that arm that hangs down in front of your monitor that you actually look directly at when you're doing your
But
content.
the problem is
It doesn't cover up the screen.
yeah, but the problem is sometimes
You're right.
um, I'm reading stuff off a web page, so I don't know if the teleprompter usually has bigger letters. So therein lies the challenge. But anyway, just some of the stuff that I'm doing here with
Yeah.
the studio and getting things dialed in and doing things different. Because guess what? I don't have anymore. I don't have a wall behind me. So
Right.
so making it before the wall was the limiting factor. So now I can kind of move stuff around at will and not, I guess for better words, not be as impacted. So from that regard, things are better. And yes, you're wired on Starlink today. So what I have done is I've got the two cables for the Mac Mini labeled on the switch or on the router. So now, if things go sideways and whenever the fall happens and leaves go down, I might be able to put you back on the other point-to-point system. But for now, we're both on the stream's on Starlink. You're on Starlink. we'll keep our fingers crossed. And I'm at 900 gigabits for a whole month. So I'm just about, my billing date is today. So as long as I don't go over a terabyte today, I'll be under the 1 terabyte window for SpaceX. And that's what I was worried. So,
Yeah. No, I can see that.
but anyway.
So you sent me a couple of topics that we might want to cover today, and I thought, a couple of them were intriguing, and I wasn't that familiar with it, but I
Sure.
did do a little bit of research on them. And the first one I think we both promoted pretty heavily was the ugly baby concept in podcasting.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what it is I really have a handful of things. Content and format issues, marketing and promotion, audience engagement, distribution and platforms, monetization and revenue generation, production and technical issues, branding, analytics adaptability, competition and saturation, different external factors, and just being the workload management. And it sounds like, that's a whole bunch of high level things, but I've really been working on trying to figure out as we talk to content creators and they say, I've got an issue with my podcast. I'm like, okay, again, number one, what is the goal of your show? And is the content clear and concise to meet that goal? Is it focused to make that goal every single episode? If the goal is to build a big audience, are you doing heavy engagement? Are you trying, all these things that go along? Is it about building your reputation? Is it build your funnel? Whatever. I try to get into the deep nitty gritty and then break it down into these categories. Talking about inconsistent quality, irregular posting schedule, what goes along with that. Is your episodes too long where you're not engaging people, you're wasting people's time? There's just so many different elements that could cause a show to stagnate or not grow or move forward. And there's never just a single issue. My easy go-to is go to their website and look at it and say, well, people can't follow or subscribe to your show just by landing on your website. But that's just one of probably 40 different things a podcaster can do or needs to do. And what really tied it in was we had this discussion about the Diary of a CEO at Podcast Movement having 60 people on his staff. Well, you and I don't have time. We can't afford, nor are we big enough to have 3 people on staff, let alone 60 people on staff. So, what are things podcasters can do? And so I have these, I call it the ugly baby talk, and that kind of ties into stats sometimes too. But it's like, are you a real personality, or do you deliver your content like a robot? Are you giving confusing or vague episode titles? It runs the gambit. Do you even have you even spent 10 minutes on a marketing strategy? Have you found where your tribe hangs out? How's your visual branding? Are you leveraging guests that you have on? It just, I got this list that I made. And usually when you start going through this stuff and talking with content creators, their eyes glaze over and they can only do 3 or 4 of these things. They can't do all of them.
Well, I think that's the bigger thing that I was curious about, this whole title, Ugly Baby, I guess. And I don't think we've been really clear on why that term is used to describe what you're talking about here.
And maybe it's the wrong title, but.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think it has application here. I think, to me, it points to like a podcaster creating something and being really, really proud of what they created, but not really understanding that externally maybe it doesn't look as good as it as you think it is, right?
Right.
And I think that's where the analogy really, really works. And it creates an environment where, you as a leader of a podcast distribution and hosting platform, Todd, and myself for many years, is having sometimes difficult conversations with podcasters
Yeah.
and being able to, I think you dived into a lot of those topics right at the beginning here of how complex this is. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're facing, is that the shows that are being very successful, like the Diary of a CEO, it really exemplifies the complexity of the medium today. And it's not just about podcasting; it's about creating, a media company now. And oftentimes that's kind of how these bigger content creators are starting to think about this type of online content as mainstream media kind of fades into oblivion. We're kind of replacing people's expectations of really, really high production quality podcasts.
And
And I think a lot of people that are creating podcasts just don't have the experience, the knowledge, the resources to play at the level that is increasingly becoming expected.
and at the same time, I don't want to make people feel like, oh my God, I got to do all this stuff. They're just going to quit.
Well, and I think
So, you know,
Todd, I think that explains a lot of what we're seeing. And people are getting frustrated. People are feeling like they can't do everything that needs to be done. And it's getting more complicated. I think AI had the promise of making things easier, but I'm not sure in a lot of ways it has quite yet. And because in some ways it maybe has gotten in the way of quality to some degree.
so
Um,
So I've
yeah.
adopted something my grandmother told me, my late grandmother told me many, many, many years ago. And it applies to relationships and it applies to podcasting.
Yeah.
It's not what you love about your podcast or what you love about the person that you are with. It's what you can put up with. It's the
Oh, yeah.
it's the things that you don't like, but you still love your podcast. You may not like that you don't have the best album or episode art. You may not like that you don't have the best branding positioning. You may not like your analytics. But to turn that around, and this is what I try to end conversations with, is that, okay, we can do all these things,
Hmm.
and you can't eat a whole cow in a day. You might be able to eat a pie in a day, but you can't eat a whole cow in a day. So
Right.
you have to take this thing a little chunk at a time, right? And embrace what you love, and then try to enhance what you hate. And also remember that you have this beautiful audience that's already listening to you. People are those that are currently subscribed. And then
Hmm.
we go into that mindset of, oh, I only have 500 listeners. And, and then I this is the trick I do. And matter of fact, let me go to Google Images.
I know what you're going to do.
Yeah. And, I'm in the call with the individual, and I say, show me 500 people. And Google Image will throw up an image that crowd sizes. Here, this is what 500 people look like. And this is a
Yeah.
virtual picture. But
Yeah.
if we use that as an example, then what happens when you are you are sitting backstage at an event and you're about ready to walk out to a gymnasium where 500 people are sitting down and waiting for you to give a presentation? And it goes back to this mindset content creators have to get into, that They have to visualize their audience, because if you have 500 people listening to your audience, you better damn well prepare as if 500 people were listening to you. You would not just, like you and I just did today, pull the mic up and go. You would have a good plan, and you'd went over it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times. You may even have practiced a little bit and contemplated in your mind your talking points and how you're going to step through this to go up and stand in front of 500 people live and give a 45-minute or an hour presentation or an interview. You're going to prepare harder for that. So when I tell podcasters that, I get this, So we spent time telling them what they can do, what they should do, and more importantly, prepare for an audience that is, many shows reach that 1,000 listener barrier. Many do.
Sure.
It's not unusual. So visualize that. And if you have to, print that image out that you searched and put it somewhere where you can see it before you get and go on your show, and you'll have a whole different attitude. I think it's so, we sit behind a microphone, or you and I, microphone and camera, and oftentimes you try to do it more than I do, and we're doing a little more prep for the show than we used to, but we have to take into account that there's 5 figures of people listening to this podcast.
Yeah, it does put an additional kind of, I don't know if pressure is the right word on it, or preparation that typically should be done. And this topic kind of came up around doing an interview of sorts. And what's different about the show that we do is occasionally we do interviews on this show, but it's usually, and what's interesting is the dynamics of the audience when it's just you and I, right? Because we really dive into topics at a pretty deep level because we have the time to do it. But this topic of doing interviews is really emblematic of this question, because it's the combination of listening and preparation. And I think one of the skills that most people don't realize you really need to have to be able to be a successful podcaster that's doing an interview, like a one-on-one conversation, is that there is a lot of preparation for that conversation that's done in advance, but that isn't the sole thing that you need to follow is your preparation. What you need to do is you need to be listening, you need to be thinking, and you need to be off the cuff too, to some degree. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think the skill that's needed is the ability to think on your feet, to think when you're in the middle of the podcast, and to have a conversation, not a rote interview, right? Where you ask a question, you stop talking, the person you're interviewing does all the talking, and all you do is ask these pre-prepared questions. I don't think that's the era that we're in right now. I think the era that we're in right now is like what we do with this show. And this is why audiences are attracted to the shows that we do that are just you and I, because the conversations that we have on this show is actually where the value is. It isn't really as much with having an interview, right?
Yeah.
Because those tend to exclude as well as include, right? If an audience is coming to this show to listen to you and I, then they're actually missing that if we have a guest. So it's around expectations, but it's also around, a more complex topic than just preparation and having all these things that we've talked about kind of all buttoned up. Because I do know shows that are very popular on YouTube, likely very popular on podcasts, that don't have a lot of heavy production, don't have a lot of heavy things that are behind their shows, that are very popular as well. Because it really, at the end of the day, it's about personality, it's about information, it's about value, right? And that perspective of content quality, which I've done episodes on here recently, is a little bit of a misnomer. Is like, well, one person's quality is another person's trash. So how do you gauge what is quality content, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to making a podcast. And I don't know, Todd, if you've thought about this issue before. I know that the podcast that you do, your Geek News Central podcast, you've been doing the same way for many years, and you've obtained an audience and you've grown that show, but it isn't a show that's got lots of glitz and glamour
No.
and lots of splashy guests and a lot of promotion behind it, but you've been able to maintain a loyal audience because of you.
Yeah, that's correct. So, and this leads into a comment that's made by Beauty Bubble on YouTube. I mean, on the YouTube comment. She says, an idea on the truth of why people become successful on social platforms. In the case of podcasting, PewDiePie said, of course, PewDiePie is a famous YouTuber. People have to love you enough to deeply care about you and all that you do. All the rest is voodoo. So I agree.
Mm-hmm.
This is, until you have a moment, and my moment came early in podcasting, from a tragedy. That moment I came home having missed my 200th episode because of my father's death, and coming home and not having been on email and opening up my inbox to 5,000 emails of condolences from my audience is when I had this moment.
Moment, right? Yeah.
Where I said, these aren't just fans of the show. They're family. They're Ohana. They care. They really care. And until you have that moment, you just, and I don't wish that scenario on anyone, but at some point, someone's going to have a moment. You're going to be somewhere. Someone's going to walk up to you, grab you, say, thank you. Thank you for doing your show. And that's worth 1 million emails. Thank you. You helped me. You got me through something. The 27 episodes my mom and I did after my dad died, and we talked, basically it was therapy for us. All our goal was to help just one person that had lost a spouse. And over the years, that people have come to us, and now and again, I think we're probably up to 25 people that have emailed and said, hey, you really helped me get through a bad spot. But that was the goal of that show, was just to help one. And it was therapy for us to do the podcast just as a method to overcome grief and, talk about the craziness and, her crying when she couldn't find the lawnmower key, and my buddy had to go over and find the lawnmower key, and, stuff like this, and, if again, you visualize that the audience is what it is from a size standpoint, and you prepare to talk to that audience as it is, and you give your heart to them in whatever content and make a personal connection, everything that Beauty Bubble just said in what PewDiePie said is spot on. People have to love you enough to deeply care about you and all that you do. And Rob, I don't think we have people that love us. They probably.
Well, I don't know that anybody. I mean, realistically, does anybody expect that we would care if we had that happen? But I mean, I think it would be. It's an interesting psychological question.
Yeah.
Do we really care if this community loves us, or
some people hate me?
Just tunes in, right?
Right.
To hear us boxing with each other,
Yeah.
Or is it? I mean, lots of audiences have different motivations.
Yeah, that's true.
Connect with people, right? And it's not always a positive,
right?
It can be a negative one too, right?
And some people, I don't always agree with you, and I love that when people come up and say I don't always agree with you. That's to me means I've won, And,
right.
and often today people are afraid to say I don't agree with you. So as soon as someone comes up and says I don't agree with you, I'm like, yes, we we found that spot, right?
Well, that
And
really cuts to the chase of the issue in our world today, right?
right,
Is
right.
people having thin skin and the threat of free speech. That really cuts to the chase here,
But
right?
Rob, you can't say free speech because everyone then thinks you're, as I was told recently, as soon
I
as you
know.
start quoting free speech, and people think you're right wing wacko. So
I think it says it in the U.S. Constitution, so it should be a bipartisan issue,
you
right?
would think it would be, but as soon as and yeah, I've been told as soon as you say the word free speech, you're automatically put in a different category. But um,
I suppose, right?
so, but again, we empower people. Maybe way we should say it is podcasting empowers people to have a voice.
Okay, yeah, all right. I'm, I'm Mr. Politically Correct.
No, everyone that knows me knows I'm a big free speech advocate. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean
I
that's
know.
my political leaning.
Well,
If people,
I mean, in the bigger picture of things, I think the earlier days of podcasting, I think all of us would expound that as a virtue of this medium, right?
yeah,
And was proud of it, but all of a sudden,
you know,
now it's something you have to cower
and
in the corner
and
about, and I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense.
truth be told, if someone sat down with me and had a truly deep political conversation with me, they'd find I'm pretty moderate.
Yeah.
So whatever you believe, but
We
it's
haven't changed. The world has changed.
yeah, that's true.
That's the real truth
But
of what's
I
happening.
also had 25 years, 35 years actually, of
Mhm.
traveling around the world and meeting people from just all like walks of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
When that has to shape you, and some positive, some negative.
Yeah.
And so I guess it is, but I guess that's all I wanted to say on that. And I do have some thoughts as well. I'm feeling, how do I say this gently?
Mhm.
We need to stop the animosity in podcasting.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do I mean by animosity? I really didn't fully realize what maybe was happening until a few days ago.
Hmm.
And I won't go into the specifics, but both Apple and Spotify are doing what they have to do. And they have given us both of those platforms, whether you like their policies on how they do things, one way or the other, they have given the abilities for podcasts to be on their platforms. I'm personally biased a little bit that I know that we would not be here. This medium would not be here in the form it is today had not Apple done what they did in 2005 and made podcasting available on iTunes, which then led to a podcast, which then led from an iPhone to a podcast app on Apple Podcast. Spotify has come into the scene, but there seems to be a growing number of people that want to give the bird one way or the other. I'm not, and I'm pretty much on the record. I understand what Spotify's doing. I understand what people give up or what they don't achieve by being over there all by themselves. But people that are on Spotify should not exclude themselves from being on Apple, and maybe vice versa. Now, I there's just a little bit of what have you done for me conversation going on right now.
Hmm.
And when you really boil it down to brass tacks, has Spotify really done anything for the average podcaster besides making their shows available on their platforms for those that have an audience over there?
I
First of
think
all,
you're dealing with a perception issue
Yeah.
versus a reality issue. I think you're
Not
um,
everyone
right.
uses Spotify for podcasts. Spotify market share in podcast is growing, but it's not anywhere near still today what Apple is. Everyone talks about poo poo about who, the Apple dropped 1%. Well, that's a good thing because there's more options for listening to content. Spotify's still a music first platform. We can't forget
Mhm.
about that. They are in a logarithmic gatekeeper. It's a closed ecosystem. We have to fully understand that. And we know that Spotify's promotional algorithm is biased towards big names on Spotify. That's just it. They are going to,
Yeah.
those big shows, names, people have contracts and partners with Spotify will be raised to the top. And
Right.
you're having ads placed without control. These are all the negatives, obviously. A lot of the stuff I'm saying here. There's not a lot of transparency. And definitely is definitely a walled garden, that's for sure. And what they're doing with your listener data, a lot of people don't care. I had a great conversation with someone recently about some of this attribution stuff and some stuff that's in works. I won't go into detail, but there may be a way ahead without selling out audiences. I'll just leave it at that.
Hmm.
Wide distribution, including Apple Podcast Index, Podcasting 2.0, is really about one thing. It's about reduced dependence on one platform. Just like my saying is, you can't build your castle on rented land. What had happened to me, I had a rented office and I got kicked to the curb. Upended my entire life. It's still affecting me.
Hmm.
You definitely have more avenues for discovery. Bonus, that's a plus by being everywhere. You got more control over revenue streams. And even Spotify realized this and have made Joe Rogan and other stuff available on multiple platforms. Why did they do that? More avenues for revenue.
Right.
You get more data, more insights, a lot more control for your audience, giving them the place to go that they want to go.
Hmm.
Diversified discovery. You can be found on YouTube. You can be found on Spotify. You can be found on Google. You can be found on podcasting apps. There's this diversified discovery.
Yeah.
There's more organic channel growth for sure. But the most important thing is and again, as long as you are living 100% within the Spotify ecosphere, and again, this sounds negative, and sorry I'm spinning it this way, but until you move, not necessarily from their hosting, but until you move to have your own place to call home, you can't retain control of your brand. And you have to, the key in podcasting here is we don't want an over association with one platform. So if you're telling your audience today, find my podcast on Spotify, you're cutting your own throat. Or if you're just saying, find my podcast only on Apple Podcasts, it's the same thing. You can't have an over association with one platform. This podcasting is because it's open. You have the ability to say the famous words, find my podcast wherever podcasts are available.
Yeah. And there's folks out there that are against saying that nowadays. Yeah.
So this animosity that I'm hearing, the animosity I hear that's come through on calls I'm on is, what has so-and-so done for me today? They don't owe you nothing.
Right.
Spotify owes you zero. Apple owes you zero. No one owes you anything. And you have to have your own destiny in your own hands. It's your choice where you want to be distributed. I chose for my personal show, didn't have it, it wasn't me to listen to on anyway. I chose for my personal tech show to be removed off Spotify. But that's my choice. Am I going to tell my podcast hosting customers move off Spotify? Never. That would be suicide.
Right.
So
It's a complicated topic, Todd.
it is. But why the
it,
animosity?
it's a generational thing, I think. I think people are
Is it Apple versus Mac versus Windows again?
I would say probably to some degree, because it's a demographic difference too. But it's also people that are focused on Spotify are thinking more internationally typically. They're typically younger, which means that they don't have really a long root in understanding the history of this medium, and
Nor do they care.
yeah, or where the majority of the audience is actually still coming from.
Yeah.
A lot of content creators, and I would say a lot of consumers that use Spotify, don't realize that the per capita consumption of podcasts on Spotify is dramatically less than the per user consumption of podcasts on Apple. So it's, you're dealing with, but yet Spotify has greater international distribution in a broad sense. So they've been able to scoop up more users, but those users are spread, like you said earlier, between music and podcast. Now, granted, that is something that exists even in Apple's platform, but to a lesser degree.
Yeah.
And it's really because Apple invested in their own standalone app inside of the Apple ecosystem, where Spotify has chosen to continue to blend podcasting in with music.
I
And that's kind of split their user base and their consumption patterns, which is exactly what Spotify wants.
I will just give a shout out again to Apple, to Ted.
Yeah.
You need maybe it's time to remind podcasters in one of your mailings how they can apply to be featured. People used to, when's the last time, Rob, you've had a podcaster ask you, how do I get featured on Apple Podcasts?
Right. That or the whole thing around new and noteworthy.
It's been probably,
Right.
no kidding, probably 2 years since I've had I take that back. I had a guy ask me
I don't really hear anybody asking about getting
several
featured
months
in
ago.
any of the platforms
They said
right now.
several months, maybe less than a month ago, I had one person ask, how do I get featured on Apple Podcasts? I said, well, there's a whole section on it on the website, and I didn't have a link. I said, just do a Google. But
Yeah, it's a form that you fill out to submit your opportunity to them, and their editors will review it, and they'll pick you or not. I think it's pretty low likelihood that they'll pick any one podcast. But
well, okay, just like me, years ago, I don't do it anymore. The BBC
well, it was
said,
a personal submission.
The BBC said, would you like to come on air and talk about specific topics from time to time? And I was like, sure. Now it was BBC Asia. So I'd get woke up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, Todd, can you come on the air in 15 minutes and talk about subject X? I may not have known anything about subject X, but guess what I always said? Yes. And guess what I did? Between brushing my teeth and getting a glass of water and slapping on my face to get woke up, I Googled the topic, and I become a 3-minute warrior. In 10 minutes, I could talk for 3 minutes on any topic, because that's all it wasn't like I was going on there to talk for an hour. They just wanted someone to come in and be a spokes
person on that topic, that particular news headline.
That headline for 3 minutes. I got Todd Cochrane from Geekness Central out of Honolulu, Hawaii on the line. And that was my prop. So what did I get? I got a little bump on the show every time I was on the BBC. So, James, I know you got to be on BBC here, but I've never been on BBC proper, but was on BBC Asia numerous times. Not on television, on
the radio. Side.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So there was opportunities like that, or like telling the newspaper, hey, I'm celebrating 500 episodes. The newspaper came and did a spot on me. You have to ask to be told no.
Right. though those opportunities don't come around as much as they used to because podcasting is
You,
not a new media anymore.
it's you have to it's just like going back to how the ugly baby conversation. How do you get those opportunities? You have to ask. They're not going to seek you out. You have
Or
to
build a relationship with a producer at that
I had
network.
every television station in Honolulu. I had the 10 emails that
Right.
I had collected at wherever I could get them, that I would send stuff. And maybe and again, it was like for like NPR in Hawaii. I would send
Mhm.
stuff to NPR. Todd, can you come in the studio and speak for 15 minutes on this topic? Yes. I didn't
Yeah.
even listen to NPR, but I got invited to come on NPR.
Yeah.
I'm not going to turn down an opportunity to get 15 minutes and push my brand. So again, these opportunities are available. And again, going back to the animosity thing, none of these platforms owe anybody anything. And are they really helping you? And if you're stuck on, oh, I love Spotify. Well, I'll tell you a little story about me not wanting to use a Mac. I had a buddy.
Well, Todd, I've never wanted to use a Mac, so that's
Okay,
okay.
I had a buddy. His name was James Reeves. Him and I flew together, and he was a hardcore Mac guy. I was a hardcore Windows guy. And man,
Yeah.
he tried to convert me for years. And we used to fly with a guy that took every amount of money that he had left over from his paycheck, and he would buy Apple stock when it was like Steve Jobs broke, like $3 and $4 or whatever it was. And I
Mhm.
used to bust that guy's guts. I'll say that politely. Told him how a fool he was for buying that worthless Apple stock. This went on for months. I mean, probably more than 2 years. I was always teasing this guy in the airplane, and we were having this thing with this other guy, and he knew I was a Windows guy. Who got the last laugh?
Right. Right.
Who got the
Well,
last laugh?
Yeah, you couldn't have gone wrong
More wrong.
either way though, Todd.
Well, if I had just
Yeah.
not been so hard-headed,
Yeah.
I'm a Windows guy, had been so hard-headed, Rob, we wouldn't have this conversation. I'd be retired like that guy is that I know, and he sends me a little Facebook punch in the face about every 6 months. Because he remembers how I teased him about his Apple stock that he bought.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Ha ha ha, dummy. So, so when I've got to the point in my life where I'm like, I can't, so maybe I'm wrong in pulling my show from Spotify. Maybe I'm the dumb one already. I don't think so, but I'll pay the price if I do.
Well, I think you have to look at these things to some degree about, what the future looks like, not so much what the past has been or what it is currently. And what are the big trends that are moving things in a certain direction? I mean, I think as you look at Spotify, they are trending to be growing. They're picking up what is perceived to be market share from Apple, which gives you this impression that they're growing,
But
they're expanding.
But the problem is it comes with risk.
Right. Of course,
How
it comes
many
with risk,
emails
right?
did I get today of deplatformed episodes? 2. I got 2 today.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked at the shows, political content, pulled from the platform. So,
Yeah.
okay. So if you say the wrong thing, this goes back to the heart of podcasting.
Mhm.
We're the only platform on this earth, in the known universe, where you cannot be deplatformed. You can still be sued. You can still be called a kook. You can still, lose your job, but you can say whatever you want to say
Yeah, you
on your
can, but you
podcast.
can't be kind of protected from the consequences.
But at the same time, if
Right.
you have a political opinion in a very politically charged environment right now, and
Right.
and you have episodes being removed, well, and they're not being removed from other platforms. Hmm. Hmm. I guess this is my favorite thing. When I was be on the airplane in the Navy, and someone would do something. One of my trainees that I was
Well,
training would do something. I'd go, really?
well, Alex Jones is a perfect example of this.
Well, and a lot of people don't like Alex Jones. So, but
Well,
again,
that's
regardless,
as far as I'm concerned, that's perfectly okay. It's just, he's an example of
yeah.
what happens,
And he got
right?
and he
In
got
these,
sued for stuff he said, and
right. So he's not immune from the consequences,
right
but he certainly, and he got taken down by many podcast distribution platforms for, some hate speech that he had on his program.
again
But
alleged hate speech. So again,
well, it's always back then when that happened, most of the terms of service were pretty kind of vague on this topic, and they still are today around hate speech, right? What's the definition of what
well,
hate speech is?
the Supreme Court has weighed in on that.
Right, and now well, I mean, it's historically been linked up to some sort of a threat
A
or some
threat,
sort of
yeah. I'm going to do this to you, X,
yeah,
Y, Z.
exactly.
That's right.
And that's been where that line has typically been drawn.
Right.
But I do think that we've expanded that line quite a bit over the last few
Well,
years.
others have
Hate
tried
speech
tried because they don't like speech,
right.
and again, we don't need to go over that. But at the
No,
same
no, I think
point,
that I think all of us are clearly aware of what we're talking about here.
so but herein lies the catch.
Right.
If you control your feed and you are on open podcasting, you can say whatever you want. It's on you.
Well, and like Alex, he was able to maintain his RSS feed.
He's still online. Yeah.
He's still distributing his show. He's still distributing off of his own website.
And I think 99.9% of podcasters will probably never be sued.
Right.
Although there's been a number of these cases where people are sued for different reasons, using music and different types of things. But
music and some level of defamation
Right.
lawsuits.
Yeah.
I think copyright is
Yeah.
the more typical scenario.
But
right?
again, we go back to the essence of podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
The essence is, and and this is where I'd hold the line, is,
Mm-hmm.
and this is going to be a new term for me. I'm going to be using it a lot. Hold the line means we have to understand the value of open and what it has provided us and allowed us to grow to the medium that we are today. And when the walls crumble down and the money runs out, and advertisers, well, let's look at a layoff that just happened. Another big layoff.
Who is this?
Let me see. I'll pull it up.
In the podcasting space?
Yeah.
Or
Well, it just overall. Let me find it. It was, who was it? NP. Oh, where is it? The 8% of they're going to host read only. Who was that? Crap. Hang on, I'll find it here. Oh, man. I thought it was in this content stream right here. I didn't. Oh, here we go. That was on the media. WNYC laying off another 8% of its workforce and will now start doing host-read ads. Oh, so now they're going to be forced to do host-read ads. WNYC.
Interesting. Okay. They're forced to do host read ads.
Forced to do host-reads.
Wow. That's something unique, Todd. I have to say
Forced.
that's
Yeah, that's an interesting development, isn't it?
yes, it is. Yes, it's like, we're going back to where we used to be, and somehow that's innovative now.
Yeah,
Right.
and here you're going to have hosts now that are basically going to say, "Hey, read this read for such and such product and use this promo code." And yet, WNYC is the biggest income supporter, supposedly, of WNYC. Listener support. Yet they've laid off 8%, and they're forced to do host read ads. Mm-hmm.
And even, well, what the Lipson CPM numbers were pushed out this week too.
Race to
It
the
looks like
bottom,
they dropped 3% down to
like
$21.
21. Yeah, well, it's
Right.
always hovered at 20. No matter that we can spend
20 to 24, I think
we
it's
can
been the
spend
range.
10 hours on that topic alone. But so
Right.
again, for you independent content creators, your
Right.
indies, never to fear. You're not beholden to your advertiser because you don't get them. 95% of you are not getting an advertiser because they've ignored you. So you have nothing to lose.
Right.
Nothing, because don't worry, you're good. Listener support, value for
Right.
value.
Right.
Learn it, live it, breathe it. And by the way, we are lit and live right now. So I do want to thank those of you that are streaming the show live on your favorite modern podcast app at podcastapps.com. So, Rob, I think, we've come full circle here, but again, kill the animosity. Let's embrace what we have built here over the last 19 years and understand the value of what we have put our blood, tears, and sweat in. I've lived this 24/7 since October 9th of 2004, Rob. How long? And you've been doing this for a month longer than me.
Yeah, I'm coming up on 20 years in 11 days. So, yeah.
We didn't build this medium for it to be controlled by some entity that wants to put their finger on you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it goes back to, oh, it ain't going to happen to me. I don't talk about anything until it is.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder, Todd, if that's really ever going to happen in this medium. I mean, as
That,
long as we have RSS, it's going to be difficult for any
well,
company
no,
to
it's
actually
true.
do that. Right.
But if we have this mindset of people that says, I don't need beeping so-and-so company,
Right.
what have they done for me?
Right.
What they have done is they have made this medium possible.
Well, Todd, I think we're coming into an era where people want to get special treatment, handouts, get a boost. I don't know what the right word to describe it is, but I think that there is and it's a generational thing. I think that there is a desire to get support from these platforms somehow to help people that are struggling to be successful. And that's where this is coming from. I think there's an expectation that, well, this is the big company. They should be able to help me be successful. So,
What
and then
makes
Todd, go ahead.
I don't want to even go there. We're not. I don't.
No, I know you don't, but I think it is a psychology that's motivating this, that it's almost like an entitlement, right? That people feel like that there's a responsibility there.
If you have built a successful, massive audience, you won't have to ask. They will come to you.
Right. It's true. But you typically have to do that first.
Does YouTube reach out and help creators that are having 1,000 views on their YouTube listens? No. What does YouTube do? Until you get the prerequisite number of listener hours, and you get to a prerequisite set of number of listeners, which is usually in the millions, then you get invited to YouTube special events. You just don't get invited to any special creator event by having an idea. Now, if
Well,
you've
Todd,
had,
they've they've recently announced that and this is a buzz in the YouTube creator community right now, is that um, YouTube's algorithm has been adjusted to prioritize new channels and new creators on their
okay,
platform.
this thing's
So
getting a little dull.
well, I think it gets back to what you were just saying, Todd. I think that as the big get bigger and the big get more successful, there's this perception that the little guy is getting
We'll
left out,
see.
right?
But
Right.
again,
So, so
they're going to be very selective in making sure there is a threshold of success you already have. You're not going to be Todd and getting surfaced by YouTube, and it's never going to
well,
happen.
okay. Okay, I think you're maybe missing their bigger point, and that's that they're trying to incentivize smaller creators or people that are willing to create new channels, right? So bringing new blood, maybe
Mm.
younger creators into the medium, and then having those creators be kind of like maybe favored for some period of time to determine if they have traction, right? And then if they have traction, then they will encourage them. Because I did notice a change in the algorithm, even with my own channel, probably a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, where it seemed like they had made a big change and they were evaluating content creators on their platform differently. And so I think if you're a longtime creator on their platform, your threshold of success kind of that's required kind of went up, and maybe they're taking that as a kind of like an adjustment for making room for new creators to come in and create content on the platform. And then, but I'm sure they'll still evaluate it under the same kind of algorithmic model of trying to evaluate those creators based on engagement,
But
uh,
again,
a,
there's going to
a
be
length of consumption and things like
there's
that.
going to be some prerequisites. You're going to have to build a channel to a certain size before that's going to kick in. They're not just going to give any Dick, Tom, or Harry
Well, but Todd,
the bump.
think about it from the perspective is that all these platforms are heading towards algorithmic evaluation and judgment, right? So it isn't a personal thing.
Right. It's a
It's not
computer.
right. So they're going to go in and test. This is really kind of the mentality I've seen start to enter the YouTube platform, is where you can test different things, right? So I think on the back end, what they're going to do is they're going to test these new channels to see which one they see kind of like bumps in engagement, bumps in listening time. And if they see a pattern of, a glimpse of hope, then maybe they'll fit them into the algorithm and help drive those new content creators.
And meanwhile, millions of shows will get driven to the bottom. I'm so thankful that I'm in podcasting and I don't have to chase the
Well, but
YouTube.
Todd, these concepts that I'm talking about here are likely going to be coming to podcast consumption platforms.
Well, if it helps raise indies, it's a much better chance of being discovered, considering there's only 350,000 active podcasts right now. So a much smaller pool to bring the cream to the top.
Yeah, but that's kind of where this is all going. It's going towards an algorithmic discovery process, and I think that's Spotify, I'm sure, is increasingly engaging in this, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see Apple do it as well, where this is kind of they're doing a deeper analysis on engagement, listening time, all those kind of things, and then driving audience to those shows that people listen to the end, or they listen to 75% of it, or they watch longer time frames, because that's the kind of data that we're able to see in the YouTube platform. And I do think that there's a lot of jealousy right now between the level of metrics in YouTube and the level of metrics that's available to podcasters. And I did want to mention too that I saw that that Spreaker made an announcement. Speaking of a full circle for Spreaker, but they did make an announcement. I can share the screen with you, but they announced a new kind of like a recording tool
Yeah, they're
inside of
putting it.
their app, right?
It's interesting. It's what's old is new again.
Yeah, because when Spreaker started many years ago, back in 2010, that was the model that they had for Spreaker, is that they had an app that was for listening and creating. And what's also interesting about this new kind of recording tool that they have is that it it basically has a production process that has like sections of content, like a section that you can record that's an intro, and then a section of the show that's called the kickoff, and then a title music section,
Did they
and
buy
then
Anchor's tech?
I I don't think so.
It
This actually is the
sounds
same.
pretty similar.
This this sounds very similar to what Libsyn had with their Libsyn Studio, where you had different segmented recordings and you could
Yeah.
create a script for each segment of it. And this is kind of what this is doing. But Spreaker has always had a recording tool. It's the Spreaker app, and I used to live stream through it back when I was working for Spreaker, and it's just an interesting how Spotify removed this capability from their apps, and then Libsyn removed it, but then Spreaker added this tool to their platform. It's an interesting kind of like
When
juxtaposition of sorts.
when stuff gets removed, it means one thing.
Budget.
No, usage.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, usage was crap. And they said, "Oh man, we threw that stick of gum up on the wall, and usage was so bad it's not worth continuing the supporting code development and everything goes along with it. And let's go ahead and pull the
yeah,
plug on that."
yeah. Because what's also interesting about this kind of production workflow is that it's somewhat taking advantage of dynamic ad insertion of sorts, because you're dynamically assembling all these segments of content into one show, right?
So, Live Podcast Media says, agree with Rob. Now, big companies help local people, not YouTube helps to get followers, but they work with local creators. Apple will also make Apple Class here. Well, here's the thing: is most podcasting is not local. So, what does that even mean? If you're YouTube, you might be creating local content, but podcasts are pretty much global. Some people have local shows, and I know there's some initiative out there to push that. But if the
Yeah, I think there's more local probably in the paradigm of YouTube than you might think, Todd. I
oh,
think that there's content that's produced for local communities.
well, and I'm sure there's YouTube
Right.
reps and those, and they may not be YouTube employees. They might be ambassadors or something. So,
Yeah.
but again, I think, I'm kind of, I guess, just call me a little curmudgeon. I'm old school. Sustained superior content wins the day. And the keyword is sustained.
Right. So how do we help content creators with the sustained part?
Without telling them to go boo-hoo and cry to themselves.
Well, or, is that where we're going to see AI come in and rescue the day for all of us?
Again, I go back to the people that are creating and the ones I'm having conversations with. Perspective is needed when you look at your stats, and again, visualizing how many people are actually reaching. I think about my own personal company. Who do I get to talk to on a daily basis? About 20 people. That's who I have influence over. And yet, not really that many. I have, a handful that I have direct influence over. Then I have my CTO. She has influence, and then we coordinate. So we're a small business. So I don't have influence over hundreds and thousands of people, but my show does. The people I reach in my show, I have in not necessarily influence, but I'm in their ear in this show and my other, 3 to 4 times a week, I'm in people's ears. So as long as you're respecting who you're reaching, again, what is the goal? Is the goal to be a superstar and have 100, 200, 300,000, a million listeners and be able to monetize and make money? Very, very, very hard, and very, very few people will achieve that. So again, what is the goal that you're doing for your content? And I would fair say that more than 90%, the goal is not, maybe 80%, the goal is not advertising. There's other means.
Yeah.
And I hear it when people say, well, what is it? I want to build a lead gen, or I want to learn enough to become the subject matter expert in this topic, or I'm doing this because I love it. I don't worry about money. I think that's 50% of the folks alone. At least 50 to 60% don't give a care. They just do it because they love creating content and love to talk like I do, and you do.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's true. Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed that there's a conversation that's brewing out there. I heard Daniel J. Lewis and Dave Jackson talk about podcast conferences on their podcast,
Oh,
the future of podcasting podcasts that they do.
Oh.
And they were talking a lot about kind of what we might see with podcasting conferences as we saw this kind of throwback that we just heard around the big comeback of host reads.
oh.
is it, are we potentially seeing a comeback in the need or the desire or the willingness for people to start putting on podcamps again? These concepts of smaller one-day events. And I think we're seeing the Podfest
Interesting.
is heavily involved in trying to do this around the country as well. Are we going to see kind of like podcamps start popping up again where people in local communities can get together and talk about?
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see that there's a podindie.com in it looks like the Indianapolis market on November 9th that's coming up.
So
And
it's interesting because we've been in heavy conversation ever since the end of podcast movement about. Matter of fact, we got talked about, Rob, on the podcast movement. In the podcast movement group, the show got talked about, and what we talked about from the last show, and
okay.
and in essence of everyone has a different objective when they go to a show. Some people go to attend and learn. So I'm sure for the attendees, it was probably a fantastic event,
Right.
to go and learn and to network. Different vendors have different goals. And if you were a certain type of vendor, you probably were thrilled with the type of content creator that was there because you were that was your business, that was your customer. That was the person that would be a potential customer for you from a commercial standpoint.
Yeah.
But definitely my segment of business, besides waving a flag, I think that we've already talked that to death, but we were talked about quite a bit. And I think too is you probably got out of the show is most people probably got a lot out of the show because that was their objective, was to go and learn, which is great. And advances podcasting, and you got to hear lots of great speakers, and so I'm sure from that regard it was good. So our perspective, my perspective, is different because I go there with a different goal.
Right.
So again, not poo-pooing. There's a lot of people there that probably had a great time, but at the same point, a couple of people in that comment thread, I don't go for the same exact reason we talked about in the show, being it a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday event. And anyway, but go back to what you were saying. I've been talking with my team we had, and I don't think this is private at all. I think we've talked about it on the show. We had originally, before COVID, had plans to put together what we called Blueberry University,
Mm-hmm.
and actually had a 2-day event planned with all the topics that we were going to cover, and we were going to start in Detroit and see how effective it was. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that this potentially could be the way ahead.
Yeah, and I
Not
also heard
necessarily
that
Blueberry University, but local events.
you also heard that the the former event, the Pod Summit event up in Calgary, is coming back
Yeah,
here this month. I was surprised to see that.
yeah, I heard that too. So
It's on September 20th to the 21st. Pod Summit YYC 2024 in Calgary.
and the challenge though is, and what we found with the local events was, unless you're local, for let's say the event is in Atlanta. All right, so I'd have to fly somebody down, pay for travel, pay for a hotel, maybe have a table there. The challenge we had with local events was you never know if there was going to be 300 people there or 10.
Right. Yeah.
And if
Sure.
you travel in and there's only 10, you go back home and report that, then that's a challenge. So if someone's thinking about doing local events, let's maybe have some regional, try to have something in some places, areas where you can draw enough people. Indianapolis should be able to draw a decent crowd, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like a hybrid between like a meetup event
Yeah.
and an actual kind of 1 day, 1 track
Yeah.
conference, which is kind of a different
A 1 day, one
spectrum.
track is easy because you can have that in a hotel.
Right.
You don't have to go to an expensive hotel. No one has to overnight. You just rent the room for the day. Probably a couple $1,000. You can have an event like that, probably with pretty good success. But again,
Mhm.
it depends on, takes local people to draw people in. So you're running a local event. Those that have had pod camps know they're almost as much work as a regular conference.
Mm-hmm.
Because most pod camps are 2-day events.
They did have a little different structure to them because I've done many pod camps over the years in the early days of this medium where all the attendees go and there's like a big master sign up board that people that attend the conference actually will just write on a board what their topic is, and they'll
Yeah.
lead a session, 15 minutes later or something like
Yeah,
that.
that was
So
like the brain dates that they had at
it's the same
Podcast Moment.
concept, right? It's the same concept.
By the way, we got 500 sats 2 days ago from Chose99, and I don't
Mhm.
fully understand what he was trying to tell us. Is failing fast and early. Now, this is something to do with the last show. Failing fast and early has been around since the advent of agile development since 1990 and embraced by all Silicon Valley companies for at least 20 years. A
Mhm.
CEO co-opting this as new thinking is beyond laughable. Agile. Where did we talk about agile development?
I don't think we did.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the topic of failing fast is certainly something, but maybe came up in the context of our discussion about the Diary of a CEO, that Stephen Bartlett
Oh, yeah. Failing fast.
conversation, because he had hired a chief failure officer, as you recall.
Oh, yeah. So that's probably what it is. Failing
Yeah.
fast and early. Yeah.
Yeah, and being able to identify those failure or weak points in your production and your distribution and your monetization, whatever.
So we've done 2 or 3 things even at Blueberry that, I said, should we take this off the shelf and revisit the code? Because, 10 years, we were 10 years too early for bringing stuff to market. And, then you think about, well, no, now there's 5 people in this space already. How are we going to compete with that? And what's our advantage? But one thing, we're heavily vested, but this is one thing that I've just continued to notice here is that the majority, high majority of podcasters don't even pay attention to any of the stuff we're talking about. They just do their show. They log into the host if they have to. They do their podcast. They have fun doing it. They're not following any of this stuff that's going on. They don't care. They're just doing their show.
Right.
And that to me is a big the big thing of why podcasting is we're not doom and gloom here. We're down, but we're nowhere are we? And oh my God, the sky is falling, and none of that is happening.
Yeah, I think people fear being stagnant and not growing, right? I think that there's always this expectation or desire to everything must continue to go up.
Well, I
And
think if
yeah,
you are stock driven and you are beholden to your stockholders, what do companies do when times are down? Well, we just saw it. The WYNC cut 8% of staff.
yeah,
So, if you're not making it in the revenue standpoint and the black line gets above the red line, or is that the right? No, the red line gets above the black line. That's a non-sustainable business model.
yeah,
So what do you have to do? Where's the first place you can go to cut corners? You cut staff.
it's probably your biggest line item.
Oh,
Probably.
it always is. It's the
Yeah,
biggest. And for a small company like me, losing one or two people would be a big deal.
hmm
We already run thin. So that's, not only we're trying to hold the line to make sure that, as this tough economic situation is in place, that we continue to hold the line and everyone gets a paycheck. And again, I don't want to, we're not in any risk, but it's something that I watch month to month to see where we're at, how we're doing, what the bank account balance looks like, the whole 9 yards. You have to, or the next thing you know, you're given 3 days notice that you're pulling the plug.
right.
That's what a lot of companies do. They don't adjust soon enough, and they run themselves into the dirt. And it's a
Yeah,
extinction event because they were unwilling to make hard decisions.
yeah,
And that's what WYNC had to do. They had to make a hard decision.
yeah.
Losing money. You can't lose money for too long. When you cut, I don't know how big their staff is, but that had to be,
I'm sure it's pretty big.
yeah. What is the size of WNC? Let me see here. What is the size of WNC staff? Did I type it right?
WNYC.
WYNC, right?
No,
Oh,
WN.
WNYC. There we go. Duh. WNC, 340 full and part-time employees. So 8% is 24, about 30 people lost their jobs.
Yeah,
And if you think about that, let's just do the calculator on that. That's, if we think about, and I'm not saying everyone is making $100,000, but let's assume that it was $100,000 salary, and which is then $150,000 worth of salary and benefits, or maybe 175. So you probably had about a savings of, that's a big one, $4.8
hmm
million. So that's
That's
not
that's probably a difference between being able to meet your payroll or not.
that's right.
Maybe.
And
Yeah,
if you're burning 4.8 million, losing, and they probably took a few more people based upon. So if you're losing $4.5 million a month,
right.
let's say you're losing 4.8 million, you multiply that out by 12, that's $57 million in a year. No. It would have been 4.8 million for the year because I figured the salary for a year. So yeah, 4.8 million for the year. So, that's How many companies can survive $5 million of in the red ever for a whole year? I don't think there's too many companies that can handle that. I don't think they run on margins that are that close.
Yeah, you can't. And it's also could be a forward-looking thing
Yeah.
too. They may be forecasting a
Right.
reduction in revenue.
Yeah.
So they're just preparing for what may be coming here in the fall. And it's going to be it's going to be an interesting fall.
Well,
Let's put it that way.
I keep hearing from people that I belong to the Moose and I go to the Legion. For those of you who know what the Moose is, I have a Moose membership and really go for the cheap drinks is what it primarily is. But you hear these business people sitting around tables and they're sobbing in their beer suds because it's not good.
Right.
Come August, September, they're like no new business, no new customers, no new contracts. And people are tightening.
So Todd, I'm flying out later this week to go out to the Alliance's event that
Oh,
you
you're
went
gonna go.
to last year.
They invited me, but I had to opt not to go. It just financially, there's not. Again, I have to look at things from a ROI standpoint. I can go hang out and have fun, and well, good for
Yeah,
you.
I haven't gone in a couple of years myself, so it was
Yeah,
just a reason to go out and see my daughter, and as well as
yeah, they invited me back, but I just can't. I can't.
go up to Seattle too. Right.
Yeah. So October 11th, I am going to Honolulu. Going to go see my kids out there, and then I go remote for a couple of months again. So back to the Philippines on the 15th or something like that. So
Okay. Yeah.
all the work I've done here in the studio will go cold iron for a while, but I am taking. I'm going to have a good camera, and I'm set up so that we'll be able to do good quality video when I'm in the secondary location.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So we have made it to the end, Rob, not surprisingly.
Yeah. And doesn't look like I'm going to be available to do a show on the 11th. So,
Well, that works because I'm going to be in the air headed towards Honolulu.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So, October 11th is a Friday. So will you?
No, I'm talking about September.
Oh, okay. I will not be available October 11th, but that doesn't matter. It's not a show day. I will be available on October 9th.
Okay. What's your availability in September?
September, I am next week. I'm not available because I'm going to be at the Maycon event. I'm going to be at the AI conference, but I'm available the rest of the month, 18th, 25th. I'll be available. I will not be available on October 2nd. We're having a company retreat down in Florida. We're bringing a team down to an event.
Yeah.
So 18, 25, 9, and then after the 9th, we'll switch to night shows again.
Yeah, I can do the 18th and the 25th of September.
All right. So next week works out. We're both not available on the 11th. So
yeah.
All right. That works out good. Okay. All
right.
If you're not using the new modern podcast app, go to podcastapps.com. Time, talent, or treasure. Have we provided you any good value today? If we have, we definitely appreciate any donations to the show. Rob and I split those donations directly. If you PayPal me, I send half of that over to Rob. So you can donate it on the show's webpage at newmediashow.com.
Or Satoshis. That's the other one.
Satoshis are fine. Yeah, that's good as well. Rob's gets the split. But more importantly, we love your dollars. So if we provided any value and made you think today, time, talent, or treasure, donate it back to the show. That time, talent is help us with the podcast. We can always use assistance.
Yeah.
I'm Todd at blueberry.com. On social, I'm at Geek News on X. On Mastodon, I'm at Geek News at geeknews.chat. Kind of a double whammy there. Rob?
Yeah, I'm on all the social platforms, uh, LinkedIn, X, Facebook, YouTube, all those, and I'm typically found off of my name, Rob Greenlee. So, or you can send me an email, rob.greenlee@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any feedback about the show or any kind of comments, I did want to throw something out to you, Todd, as well as the audience of this is do you guys think that we need to update the cover art for this show or do anything different with this show as we move into the future with this show? Is it time to drop the new media name or anything groundbreaking like that? Is podcasting not a new media anymore, or is it kind of like old media shows? Is that what we should call it now?
Old curmudgeon show?
The OG show, or what ideas do you have about what should happen to this show and what we should do differently to keep up with the trends, Todd?
And if you have an idea for album art, we're always
Yeah,
take donations. That's part of that talent
take them.
piece.
Right.
Because I have no talent. I use AI for everything
Or,
now for images. So,
or some sort of new intro music.
oh, that's right. Because,
Todd and Rob in the afternoon.
we're going to
Yeah,
need
so-
one that says Todd and Rob in the evening.
Right.
So-
And wherever you listen or watch
Yeah.
your podcast from.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you haven't already, go over to newmediashow.com. Please follow or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app. And this show is still on Spotify if you're listening over there. Please tell
For
us who
now,
your one or
right.
two people that are over there. But
They're probably going to drop us, Todd, before we drop them.
maybe. Yeah, maybe they don't care. They don't pay attention to what's going on. They don't listen to any of this content.
No, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're the big kahunas right now. So
Yep.
okay, all right, everybody.
All right.
Thanks for being
Todd.
here. We'll see everyone back here on the 18th.
On the 18th.
Yeah, we'll be back on
Of-
18th.
Of